We're just hearing there from Professor Peter Openshaw, really sounding a warning that the next few days could be critical when it comes to suppressing levels of the virus. Do you think more restrictions need to come in?
Well, I think the country will have been watching with concern as the R rate was confirmed as over 1 on Friday and as the number of cases has risen quite significantly this week. I think that was relatively inevitable when the government were encouraging people to go out back into restaurants and pubs to eat out and to get back socialising, to go back to work, and of course as millions of children rightly have returned to school over the last couple of weeks. But what's really important and what should have happened to underpin that gradual returning to normality was an effective and mass testing system, an effective track and trace system, and the financial ability for people to self-isolate. Now, we've heard this week about the many people that have struggled to get a test. Here in Sheffield, over a number of days, there wasn't a single testing appointment available, and I knew of constituents that were being told to go into areas that are currently under lockdown, to travel up to Scotland, up to the northeast. That's completely ridiculous to be asking people to travel around the country that are potentially infected in order to access tests. So it beggars belief, really, that when the government had asked people to get out of the house, go back to work, go back to school, that they hadn't put in place that testing capacity in order to underpin it and to make it safe. That's what's really important now, not necessarily restrictions, although we have supported the government's return to the rule of 6, but in order to make sure that we underpin a safe return to work and to slightly towards normality, that we have that testing regime and track and trace that underpins it.
OK, it's interesting to hear you say that you do support the kind of return to normality, if you like, as far as possible. So does that mean that actually you think the government's got it about right with opening pubs, restaurants, trying to get the economy moving again?
Well, look, of course we need to keep the economy moving, and keeping the economy moving is not is not at odds with protecting people's health, because we need the economy to be functioning in order to fund the health service and to make sure that the NHS is as open as possible. But these measures need to be kept under review. At the moment, it appears that transmission is happening in households, but of course if people aren't accessing tests, and we know that many people aren't, the fact that there wasn't a single test available in Sheffield suggests that it's far greater than the 10% of people that the government are suggesting at the moment. Then the fact is we don't know exactly where this transmission is happening, so we need to get that testing system in place in order to understand exactly what is happening with the virus, and then all these measures need to be kept under review. We will support the government in restrictions and in measures that they take, as long as they are based on evidence and sound medical advice. At the moment, we can't know the full picture because they have not got the testing capacity in place.
Interesting to hear about the situation where you are in Sheffield. Now, I want to move on to Brexit, because there's been a lot of movement, should we say, on Brexit in the last week. And of course, there'll be even more next week when the Internal Market Bill comes to the House of Commons. Now, Keir Starmer has written for the Sunday Telegraph this morning, saying that we should get on with Brexit so we can focus on defeating coronavirus. I mean, it's pretty easy to throw around these slogans, isn't it? Get on with Brexit, let's get Brexit done. But I'm just interested in what that actually means. Is Labour effectively saying, then, that the government should compromise on the two outstanding issues that are preventing a trade deal right now? So would Labour support the government rolling over on fishing and also on state aid?
Well, Keir Starmer, as you say, has written for the Telegraph to say that Boris Johnson's actions and the government's actions this week completely compromise progress towards securing a free trade deal with the European Union. What they've done by picking a fight...
We know that the things that are... forgive me, that some of the things that are holding up the trade deal are on fishing and on state aid. So in order to get Brexit done, is Labour saying that the government should compromise on those two things?
Well, the point is, Sophie, that these issues are not insignificant and they're important. They're important to swathes of our economy, but they're certainly not insurmountable. And what's baffling about the government's approach is that there was every prospect that those issues were going to reach agreement in the Joint Committee this week. And it's really important that it is through that Joint Committee between the UK and the EU that agreement is reached. That was what was put forward in the withdrawal agreement and indeed in the Northern Ireland Protocol. What I would say on state aid is this. The government has not used its ability to spend on state aid, even whilst we've remained in the EU. So the idea that we're picking a fight with the European Union on this and potentially undermining the prospect of securing a trade deal is quite frankly baffling, when they've not even used their ability and their potential to spend on state aid whilst we've been a member of the European Union. Look, Boris Johnson's and his government's actions are seriously undermining and jeopardising the chance of securing a free trade agreement with the European Union. Its unilateral approach.
It's easy to criticise the government and the negotiating tactics, and certainly, when we talk to Robert Buckland, we'll be going over whether or not this was a sensible move for the government to do. But I just want to go back to the fundamental point, because it's very easy to say, let's get Brexit done, let's get a trade deal. The two outstanding issues are on state aid, subsidies, and on fishing. And I still just don't understand whether or not Labour would compromise on those two things.
Well, Sophie, the protocol states that state aid will apply to Northern Ireland. That is what that is where the agreement that was what was agreed, that was what was negotiated, that was what was written down and ratified into international treaty by Boris Johnson. That has already been agreed.
So you're happy then with the existing deal, even though you voted against it? You said it was a betrayal.
The reason we voted against it wasn't because of the Northern Ireland Protocol. We have always supported measures in order to protect the Good Friday Agreement and to avoid a border on the island of Ireland. The protocol was designed in order to uphold that Good Friday Agreement and to preserve peace and prosperity in Northern Ireland. We didn't oppose Theresa May's deal on the basis of the backstop, nor did we oppose Boris Johnson's deal on the basis of the protocol. What his actions now are doing is undermining the protocol and necessarily pushing the conversation back to the border on the island of Ireland. That is seriously risky and undermines all the progress that has been made since the Good Friday Agreement.
So Keir Starmer says he wants to stop banging on about Europe. Labour are now saying that the government shouldn't be rowing back and trying to override a withdrawal agreement that you voted against and thought was a bad deal at the time. Isn't the truth of it that actually Labour is really acting in its own self-interest here? You just want to stop talking about Brexit because you know that that would be the best thing for you politically?
Well, I think the country wants to stop talking about Brexit, and the people of Northern Ireland, many different people across communities that I've spoken to are looking upon this incredibly wearily, that these issues that we were told were settled are now being reopened, that wounds that we thought were healing are now being reopened, and that the government are unnecessarily inflicting this again on the country. And quite frankly, this is the last thing the country needs right now. As we're attempting to respond to COVID and cope with economic recovery, what we need is a deal with the European Union that protects our trading relationship, protects businesses, protects jobs and protects peace in Northern Ireland. What Boris Johnson is doing is risking all of that, and it's, as I say, the very last thing the country needs at this critical moment. We've left the European Union. On the 31st of December, the transition period will end. We'll be stepping out onto the world stage on the 1st of January as global Britain for the first time in 40 years as non-members of the European Union. Why on earth would we be stepping into that next chapter of our history as the United Kingdom, undermining our reputation as a country that respects its word and upholds the international rule of law?
Okay, now we are out of time, but I just want to ask you just very quickly to comment on the government's new sentencing policy. So at the minute you can only get a whole life sentence if you're over 21. They want to say that if you're between 18 and 21 you should be able to get a whole life sentence. Is that something that Labour supports?
Well, look, we'll review the law when it comes forward, and we'll consider whether or not to support it then. But and I hope that Robert Buckland addresses this later. I think what's important to note is that the criminal justice system is in complete disarray because of years of cuts, of privatisation of the probation system and of undermining of the courts and of the police. So, there are many issues with the criminal justice system. The length of sentencing is quite low down the list of issues that faces it at the moment.